Big Blue, stop right now. The locker room just went quiet, and one name is echoing through the Meadowlands: Trace Ford. A fringe roster hopeful just got a lifeline nobody saw coming, and that's only the first bombshell tonight. A Giants legend is being told to pack his bags, and a wide receiver already got the axe while nobody was looking. Here's the first payoff. John Harbaugh had a chance to praise any player after the Miami win, and he picked one guy. If you bleed blue, white, and red more than you trust Dallas, hit like and subscribe right now. We start with the lifeline that just changed one man's whole season. Stay locked, there's a double cliffhanger at the end. One question. That's all it took to reveal who John Harbaugh really trusts on this roster right now. Reporters gave him an easy out after New York's blowout win over Miami. Plenty of guys to choose from, plenty of names to spread around. He didn't spread it around. The name? Trace Ford. And this is the kind of moment that can save a career. Here's exactly what happened. Speaking the morning after the Dolphins win, Harbaugh was asked who stood out to him. His answer, word for word: "I thought a lot of guys stood out. To single out one or two guys, you probably have to single out 10 or 15 guys. It was a lot of guys flying around. Trace Ford had a great game. Numerous guys had really good games. Read that again." Harbaugh listed off a disclaimer about how many players impressed him, and then still made a point to say Ford's name specifically. That's not an accident. That's a head coach planting a flag for a guy nobody outside the building is talking about. Here's why Ford needed this moment so badly. He's fighting an uphill battle for a roster spot, currently buried behind Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeau on the edge, with Chauncey Golston also soaking up snaps in that rotation. That makes Ford the fifth man in line, at best, and Big Blue only kept 3 edge defenders on last year's initial 53-man roster. Do that math and Ford's odds looked slim just a week ago, but then he went out and backed up the buzz. Against the Dolphins, Ford played 19 defensive snaps and made it count, logging 1 quarterback pressure and 1 credited run stop. That followed a solid preseason opener against the Vikings too, where he came up with 2 run stops and another pressure. 2 games, consistent production, and now the head coach's public stamp of approval. Ford also brings real value on special teams, and there's a rumor inside the building, according to people close to the coaching staff, that Harbaugh personally values that phase of the game more than almost any coach the Giants have had in years, going back to his years building championship rosters in Baltimore. That alone could be the tiebreaker between Ford and the next guy on the depth chart. So does this mean Ford is locked into the 53? Not exactly, but it means something. A new head coach, evaluating this roster with fresh eyes, chose to publicly praise a fringe edge rusher over every other name available to him. That's the kind of signal front offices use to justify keeping a player nobody expected to survive cuts. And here's the thing about a coach like Harbaugh. He's built a reputation league-wide on valuing special teams and effort over draft pedigree, which is exactly the profile Ford fits. The 25-year-old plays with a relentless motor, the kind that never gives up on a rep until the whistle blows, and that's precisely the trait that gets a fringe player remembered when final cuts come around. Worst case for Ford, this performance locks up a practice squad spot and keeps him in the building all season, 1 injury away from meaningful snaps at a position that's suddenly thinner than it looks on paper. Best case, he forces the front office to rethink keeping only 3 edge defenders like they did on last year's initial roster. Do you think Trace Ford makes this 53-man roster as a 4th edge rusher? Or does he end up on the practice squad watching from the sideline? Drop your prediction below, and if you love seeing a new coaching staff reward hustle over reputation, smash that like button right now. But while one player just got a lifeline, another Giants name is getting pushed straight toward the exit, and this one's a lot more painful because it involves a name Big Blue Nation has loved for a decade. Stay locked, John Harbaugh has been busy. Take over a team that finished 4-13. And you don't ease into the job, you rip the roster apart and rebuild it fast. He's already made a dozen calls nobody expected. But the next one being floated might be the most emotional of the entire offseason because it involves a name Big Blue Nation has loved for a decade. Sources are now pushing Harbaugh to trade a veteran wide receiver before Sunday's deadline. Cash him in while he still has value instead of watching him ride the bench all season. The name being floated? Odell Beckham Jr. Here's where this comes from. In a feature published Monday, Bleacher Report's Mo Moten laid out the players he believes could get traded across the league before cuts, noting that as many as 1,184 players league-wide will be released, return their playbooks, and scramble for practice squad spots once the deadline hits Sunday. Moten believes the Giants could, and honestly should, move on from Beckham right now, while he still carries a name that means something around the league. Let that sink in for a second. This is the same Odell Beckham Jr. who Moten himself calls arguably the best wide receiver in football during his prime years in Giants blue. 3 straight seasons over 1,300 receiving yards to start his career. One of the greatest catches in NFL history, the kind that gets replayed on highlight reels a decade later, a Super Bowl ring with the Rams to close out that chapter. That resume is Hall of Fame conversation territory, easily one of the most talented receivers this franchise has ever put on the field. But resumes don't play snaps, and the numbers right now tell a completely different story. Beckham is closing in on his 34th birthday, and his last 1,000-yard season came all the way back in 2019. Last year in Miami, across a full season, he caught just 9 passes for 55 yards. 9. That's not a decline, that's basically a vanishing act on the stat sheet, and it's exactly why this trade chatter is gaining traction instead of getting laughed off. Now think about what this Giants receiver room actually looks like heading into 2026. It's deeper than it's been in years, loaded with veteran competition and a young WR1 in Malik Neighbors who's finally healthy again. That depth is great news for Jackson Dart, but it's brutal news for a 33-year-old name trying to hang on to a roster spot on reputation alone. Beckham signed with New York this offseason, chasing one more shot at relevance in the building where his career started, and by every account he's given the effort in camp. Effort just hasn't shown up on the stat sheet in a meaningful way, and roster spots at cut day don't get awarded for sentiment. If New York genuinely believes Beckham won't survive the full season on this roster anyway, cashing him in now for anything, a late pick, a swap, a future consideration, beats watching him get released for nothing in a few weeks and letting a division rival scoop him up for free. This is still just a rumor at this stage, nothing official from the building, but it's the kind of rumor that tends to have real smoke behind it once national insiders start repeating it across multiple outlets. Does trading Odell Beckham Jr. right now feel like a smart business decision, or does it feel like the Giants giving up on a legend too early before Week 1 even kicks off? Drop your honest take below. And if this one stings a little, you're not alone. Hit that like button for OBJ's legacy in Giants blue regardless of what happens next. But while Beckham's future gets debated in headlines, one wide receiver's fate has already been decided, quietly, with almost no warning at all. Stay locked because the roster is getting thinner by the day. No press conference, no farewell tour, just a quiet transaction buried in a Tuesday news cycle, and one more locker cleared out at MetLife Stadium. That's how careers end in the NFL, not with a bang, but with a one-line report from a league insider nobody outside the building saw coming. Here's what happened. The Giants released a 4th-year wide receiver this week, and the identity everyone eventually found out through league insider Aaron Wilson took a beat to sink in. The name? Ryan Miller. This one hurts a little differently than most roster cuts, because Miller actually got real run in the preseason finale against Miami. He wasn't buried on the bench collecting dust, he was out there competing for it. Miller played 32 snaps on offense and 6 more on special teams against the Dolphins. Real opportunity, real reps, a real chance to make a final impression before Sunday's deadline. And he simply didn't show up when it counted. On 15 pass blocking and route snaps, he wasn't targeted a single time. His run blocking was described as lackluster, and he failed to make any play that stood out on tape. When the coaching staff sat down to review that game, there was nothing to point to. No flash, no highlight, no reason to keep fighting for him over the guys stacked ahead of him on the depth chart. Rewind his path here for context. Miller spent his first 3 seasons with Tampa Bay, carving out a role almost entirely on special teams after signing as an undrafted free agent, chipping in 3 touchdowns on just 12 catches across 2 seasons, never quite becoming more than a depth piece. New York claimed him off waivers late last season and brought him back on a new deal early in the offseason, and for a minute before the frenzy of free agency hit, Miller genuinely looked like he had a real shot to stick. Then the additions started rolling in. Odell Beckham Jr., Braxton Berrios, Juju Smith-Schuster. Suddenly, Miller wasn't competing for a role anymore. He was competing just to be remembered, and he fell to the bottom of a depth chart that got deeper by the week. Training camp didn't change the trajectory either, and once the preseason tape confirmed it, the release became inevitable rather than surprising. Here's the part that should worry every fringe receiver still hanging onto a roster spot in this building. Harbaugh and his staff didn't wait until Sunday to make this call. They got it out of the way early, which tells you cut day is going to be even more ruthless than expected around here. Juju Smith-Schuster is already gone. Jalen Hyatt and Isaiah Hodgins are reportedly as good as gone too. Hanging on by a thread with almost no path to real snaps, Miller just became the first domino, and he almost certainly won't be the last wideout shown the door before this roster is finalized on Sunday. Think about what that says about the room as a whole. A year ago, the Giants were scraping for any receiver who could catch a football. Now they're cutting a guy who actually got real preseason opportunity, simply because the names above him on the depth chart are that much better. That's an incredible turnaround in 12 months, and it's exactly the kind of depth Jackson Dart needed heading into his 2nd season as a starter. Do you think the Giants' wide receiver room is finally as deep and talented as it's looked all camp? Or is this position still one injury away from being a real problem again? Drop your take below. And if you respect a coaching staff willing to make the hard calls early instead of dragging them out until Sunday, smash that like button right now. 3 stories, 1 roster getting ruthless, and the next 48 hours are going to reshape this entire franchise. 3 stories, 1 roster getting reshaped in real time. A fringe pass rusher just earned a lifeline from his own head coach, a franchise legend is being pushed toward the trade block, and a receiver nobody was watching already got cut loose before the deadline even arrived. This is what a coaching change looks like when it's real. Big Blue Nation, not press conference talk, actual decisions with actual consequences. Here's the bigger picture. Harbaugh is proving in real time that reputation means nothing to him, only production does. Trace Ford earns praise for hustle. Odell Beckham Jr., a legend, gets floated in trade rumors because the tape doesn't match the name anymore. Ryan Miller gets cut early because somebody else on the roster is simply better. That's a ruthless, honest evaluation, and honestly, Dallas should be worried about a Giants team willing to make decisions like this. Here's what I need from Big Blue Nation. 1. Smash that like button if you trust Harbaugh's evaluations over sentiment every single time. 2. Drop a comment. Does Odell Beckham Jr. survive final cuts or not? 3. Subscribe right now, because every subscriber makes Dallas fans furious watching this roster get sharper by the day. But listen close, the cliff isn't over. Sunday's deadline is still coming, and there's a rumor that at least 2 more veteran names are on the chopping block before this roster gets locked in. Which legend goes next? That story drops soon. Big Blue stands mighty. See you in the next war.